Hello, this is Frank with Frank's Beautiful Rocks and Minerals. To see my beautiful collection of minerals and crystals, go to my website, Frank's Beautiful Rocks and Minerals. The site's under construction and there's some flaws which I can't seem to debug, but you will be able to see many of my specimens of minerals and crystals. Also, if you watch other videos, you will see mineral identification videos where you'll see the rest of my minerals, rocks, and minerals that I have. I want to talk about Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is part of a volcano. It's a stratovolcano, the largest volcano type that there is. And those types of volcanoes don't have what's called a crater, but what's called a caldera on top of them. And that is where lava erupts or magma goes up the chamber and erupts out of the top of the mountain as lava, and also releasing lots of pyroclastic material, which is fine grains of rocks, minerals, a lot of sulfur and gases, which settle down, and in the case of Yellowstone National Park, they settle down hundreds of miles away from when it does have a major eruption. The last major eruption was over millions of years ago. However, there have been eruptions as soon as around 200,000 years ago. It's expected that it will erupt again because it is long past due. Yellowstone National Park is essentially a park in the caldera. There are many geological events that occur in the caldera of the volcano which show the activity underneath. What kind of activity is going underneath this massive mountain, which has subalpine vegetation which is almost alpine because it is very high in elevation? Well, what's happening is this. You have the core of the earth, the inner core, and then the outer core. And outside of the outer core of the earth is what's called the mantle, which is, when you look at it in terms of days, solid rock. But when you look at it in terms of speeding up the time, when you look at it over large ranges of time, this rock is actually flowing. And what it is doing is it is picking up heat from the outer core, bringing that heat up to the surface, which is underneath the caldera. It is spreading out, cooling down, and then sinking back down to the outer core again to pick up more heat. This is called a convection cell. Convection cells are common throughout the world, and the one that Yellowstone is over is called a hot spot. Yellowstone is located in the south central Rockies, and that is where the hot spot is located over the North American plate, where there is subduction, or one plate going underneath another. What are some of the geological features that you see? Well, one is earthquakes. There are thousands of earthquakes a year in Yellowstone National Park, but most are not felt at all because their magnitude is so low. Since the 1980s and 1975, actually, if you go back to that year, there have been some significant earthquakes with property damage and loss of life. Earthquakes occurring underneath lakes. One of the things that is occurring with the earthquake is the activity of that hot spot underneath Yellowstone National Park itself. It is very active. It is also rising up. The ground level is rising up in Yellowstone National Park. The United States Geological Survey and the University of Utah are now monitoring these changes in geology of the park to try to predict when the next major eruption is going to occur, as well as also for scientific interest and study. There are regions in Yellowstone National Park where elevation underneath some lakes, for example, is occurring 2.5 inches a year. That's quite a fast rate to elevate. There are geysers in Yellowstone National Park. A geyser is a geothermal vent where hot water underneath the park absorbs the heat from the hot rock over the hot spot, and it squirts out of the surface, above the surface, and falls back down to the earth on top and cools, like Old Faithful, the most famous geyser of all. But there's geysers also in other parts of the world. But Yellowstone has the largest geyser, which is called, the geyser is called Steamboat Geyser, the largest geyser of the world. There are also fissures that occur, releasing hot steam and water. These fissures occur in different locations throughout the park, usually alongside the geysers. There are ponds of water, or a better word than pond would be spring. There are springs where the spring is beautifully colored. The water is clear, and you'll see colors of blue, aqua green, orange, yellow, red. And actually, these colors are not just from pure minerals themselves, because the minerals are coming up from underneath the park, but bacteria. The bacteria is colored, and it exists in these springs, which tend to be hot. They're called thermal bacteria. They're able to deal and live and thrive in an environment which is hot. There's another name for that type of bacteria, thermotrophs. I can't think. So we covered earthquakes, the geysers, the springs, what else haven't we covered about this beautiful park? There's a lot. Yellowstone National Park has many rivers, springs, thousands of springs, hundreds of rivers, and hundreds of lakes. It's a beautiful place to visit because they have paths that you can walk along and enjoy the habitat and nature of the park. But they also have paved and built up the region so that people who are older and not fit to really hike a lot can also walk up and enjoy these geysers like Old Faithful. I have some photographs I wish to show to you. In this diagram, we see what I mean by a mantle convection cell. Here's the inner core of the Earth, the outer core, and the solid but on a long time basis liquid mantle, where the rock elevates up with the heat, bringing heat up to the surface of the earth where it's cooler, and that's why it makes that migration, because it's moving to a cooler region underneath the asthenosphere and crust. It releases the heat on the crust of the earth, then moves back down, around, and picks up more heat from the outer core. Here's a beautiful picture of one of the hot springs with the multicolored bacteria around the spring itself. Here's a photograph of a geyser. Water is shot up, sometimes up to 100 feet high, into the atmosphere, and then it returns back toward the earth, where it settles into a pool, and then back down into the earth again. And this cycle repeats. Some of these geysers are so hot that they're actually just pure steam, no water. One of the things I want to talk to you about is erosion in Yellowstone National Park. There are, what's the word for it? There are canyons in the park, carved by rivers, not glaciers, but by rivers. And because of that, the canyons are V-shaped. And you can actually see the striations along the sides of the canyon of the different layers of volcanic ash and rock, mostly rhyolites, from earthquakes and explosions in the past. Not earthquakes, but volcanic eruptions in the past. And this is Frank with Frank's Beautiful Rocks and Minerals, always reminding you to keep looking down.